So there I was, elbow deep in a malfunctioning atmospheric recycler, wondering why I ever thought becoming a maintenance engineer on a remote mining station was a good career move. The answer, of course, was sitting at our habitat module, doing homework and arguing about whose turn it was to feed Mr. Whiskers, our completely illegal pet cat. "Dad, Tommy's not doing his math problems." Emma's voice echoed through the comm system, carrying that special 8-year-old indignation that could cut through steel plating. "M2, Tommy shot back with the fierce dignity only a 5-year-old can muster. "I'm just thinking really hard about them." I chuckled despite myself, wiping grease off my hands. "Emma, help your brother instead of tattling. Tommy, thinking is good, but numbers on the page are better." 3 years since the transport accident took their mom, and I was still figuring out this single-parent thing. Turns out, keeping 2 kids alive and reasonably educated on a mining station in the middle of nowhere is slightly more challenging than the recruitment videos suggested. Who knew? The atmospheric recycler chose that moment to make a sound like a dying whale mixed with a garbage disposal. Perfect. I was reaching for my sonic wrench when the station's alert system chimed. "All personnel to stations," came Commander Valdez's crisp, military voice over the intercom. "We have an unscheduled arrival on long-range sensors." I sighed and activated my comm. "Jake here. Please tell me it's just a supply ship running early." "Negative, Morrison. Ship's trajectory and velocity are unusual. Report to command." Unusual? In space, unusual was rarely a good thing. It usually meant someone was about to have a very bad day, and on a station with a crew of 12, that someone was probably me. I made my way to the command center, passing the HAB modules where my kids were hopefully still doing homework and not plotting to smuggle more pets aboard. The command center was Kepler Station's brain, a cramped space filled with more blinking lights than a holiday display, and twice as many ways for things to go catastrophe wrong. Commander Valdez stood at the main console, his gray hair perfectly regulation short despite being literally millions of miles from the nearest military inspector. Next to him, Science Officer Krim was doing that thing where his 4 eyes blinked in sequence, never a good sign from a Nexarian. "Morrison," Valdez nodded as I entered. "Look at this approach vector." The main display showed a ship's trajectory, and he was right, it was weird. Instead of the smooth, efficient curves you'd expect from civilian or military vessels, this thing was moving in a hunting pattern, circling, probing, like a predator testing the edges of territory. "Could be engine trouble," I suggested, though I didn't believe it myself. Krim's translator box crackled to life. "Negative probability of mechanical failure given observed maneuvering precision. Pattern suggests deliberate reconnaissance behavior." "In other words," Valdez translated, "something's checking us out." "Any response to hails?" I asked. "Nothing. Complete communication silence." Valdez's jaw tightened. "I don't like it, Morrison. We're a civilian mining operation with minimal defenses." I was about to respond when the proximity alarms started screaming. The ship had just dropped out of FTL, way closer than any legitimate vessel would dare. "Distance," Valdez barked. 200 kilometers in closing," Krim reported, his voice unusually tense for someone whose species was famous for emotional control. I watched the display as the unknown ship moved with predatory grace toward our little station. My engineer brain was cataloging defensive options, which were essentially none, while my dad brain was calculating how fast I could get to the kids. "All hands, this is command," Valdez announced, station-wide. "Unknown vessel approaching. All non-essential personnel to secure stations immediately. This is not a drill." Through the comm, I could hear Emma asking Tommy what non-essential meant, and Tommy confidently explaining it meant people who weren't good at math. Under other circumstances, I might have laughed. But something about that ship's movement pattern made my skin crawl. It wasn't flying like it wanted to trade, negotiate, or even rob us. It was flying like it was hunting. The unknown ship didn't bother with fancy docking procedures. It just punched through our outer hull like it was tissue paper, sealing itself to our main airlock with the kind of technology that suggested our visitors had credits to burn and an attitude problem to match. "Well," I muttered, watching the hull breach indicators light up like a Christmas tree, "that's not ominous at all." Commander Valdez was already reaching for the emergency weapons locker, which, on a civilian mining station, contained exactly 3 pulse rifles and a prayer. "Morrison, get to your kids. Krim, send a distress signal." "Already attempting," Krim replied, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly. "Communication array appears to be jammed by sophisticated interference patterns." Of course it was, because why would anything ever be simple? The airlock cycled with a hiss that sounded way too much like a predator's sigh of satisfaction. What stepped through wasn't your typical space pirate or corporate raider. This thing stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in chitinous armor that looked like it had been carved from midnight itself. Its head was all angles and sharp edges, with eyes that glowed like amber coals. "Greetings," it said, in perfect, unaccented standard, which was somehow more terrifying than if it had growled or hissed. "I am Razak, of the Kytherian hunting clans. Your species designation is human, yes?" Valdez raised his pulse rifle. "This is a civilian station. State your business or leave immediately." Razak tilted its head with the kind of curiosity a cat shows a particularly interesting mouse. "Business? How delightfully quaint. My business, Commander Valdez, yes, I know who you are, is collecting trophies from species that believe themselves apex predators." "We're miners, not soldiers," Valdez said, his military training warring with common sense. "Even better," Razak purred. "Civilians are often more creative in their final moments." That's when I realized we weren't dealing with pirates or raiders. We were dealing with something much worse. A genuine, honest-to-God alien serial killer who hunted people for fun. And judging by the casual way it had breached our hull, it was very good at its hobby. Valdez never got the chance to fire. Razak moved faster than anything that big had a right to, closing the distance in a heartbeat. The pulse rifle clattered to the floor, followed shortly by Valdez himself. The commander had faced down pirates, corporate security forces, and at least one very angry space whale, but he went down like he'd never held a weapon in his life. "Fascinating," Razak said, examining Valdez's body with scientific interest. "Your species appears to possess standard mammalian fight or flight responses, but insufficient physical capabilities to support either option effectively." Krim was backing toward the secondary exit, his translator box stuttering with what I assumed were Nexarian curse words. "You are violating 17 interstellar treaties regarding—" Razak's laugh cut him off. "Treaties are for civilizations that acknowledge each other's right to exist. I acknowledge only the right of the strong to hunt the weak." The science officer never made it to the door. Razak didn't kill him immediately, just disabled him, with the casual efficiency of someone who'd done this many, many times before. Krim crumpled to the deck, alive, but paralyzed. "Don't worry, Nexarian," Razak said conversationally. "Your species has excellent regenerative capabilities. You'll live long enough to watch me hunt the rest of your crew. Consider it a learning experience." I was already backing out of the command center, my mind racing. This wasn't a robbery or a military action, this was a game. And games had rules, even twisted ones. My comm crackled with Emma's voice. "Dad, what's happening?" The lights went all red and Tommy's scared. My blood turned to ice. "If this thing heard the kids—" "Emergency Protocol 7, I said quietly into the comm, using our family code for hide in the safe room and don't come out until I say so. "Remember the story about the 3 little pig? Be the smart pig." "Okay, Dad, but Tommy wants to know if—" I cut the connection and ducked into a maintenance shaft just as Razak appeared in the corridor, sniffing the air like a bloodhound. "Ah, the engineer," it said, apparently talking to itself. "Jake Morrison, age 34, widower, 2 offspring. How interesting. Your psychological profile suggests strong protective instincts regarding your young. This should be entertaining." Great. The thing had done its homework. It knew about Emma and Tommy. That's when I made the decision that probably saved all our lives, though it felt like the stupidest thing I'd ever done. Instead of trying to hide, I started making noise. Lots of noise. I banged my wrench against the maintenance shaft walls, muttered loudly about trying to find an escape route, and generally acted like someone who'd watched too many action movies and not enough nature documentaries. "Oh no," I said, loud enough for Razak to hear. "The auxiliary shaft is blocked. Maybe if I try the service tunnel." "Oh crap, is that thing still out there?" Behind me, I heard Razak's amused chuckle. "How wonderfully predictable. The parent attempts to lead the predator away from the nest. Your species' behavior patterns are exactly as described in the hunting manuals." Hunting manuals. This thing had actual manuals about killing humans. The galaxy was apparently a much darker place than I'd realized. But here's the thing about those manuals. They were written by hunters, not engineers. And engineers know something that apex predators often forget. The most dangerous trap is the one the prey builds for you. I kept up my terrified parent act, making just enough noise to keep Razak interested, while I led him exactly where I wanted him to go, away from my kids, away from the other survivors, and toward the part of the station where an angry dad with access to heavy machinery could get creative. "Run, little human," Razak called out, clearly enjoying himself. "Make this interesting for me. Your cubs are safe for now. I always save the young for last. They make such delightful sounds." "Yeah, big mistake, buddy. You just made this personal. Time to show this apex predator what human engineering looked like when it was pissed off." So here I was, crawling through maintenance shafts while being stalked by an 8-foot-tall alien death machine, and all I could think about was how Emma and Tommy better write me a really good Father's Day card after this, assuming, of course, that I lived long enough to see another Father's Day. The thing about maintenance tunnels on a mining station is that they're designed by engineers for engineers. Every pipe, every junction, every access panel serves a purpose. And right now, my purpose was to convince Razak that he was hunting a panicked amateur instead of a guy who'd spent 3 years memorizing every bolt and circuit in this place. Oh God, I muttered loudly, making sure to bang my elbow against a support strut. "Where's the emergency exit? There's supposed to be an emergency exit." Behind me, I could hear Razak moving through the main corridors with the patient confidence of someone who'd done this before. A lot. His footsteps were deliberately heavy. He wanted me to know he was coming. Classic predator behavior. Make the prey panic, make mistakes, exhaust itself running in circles. Too bad for him, I wasn't actually panicking. I was navigating. "Your species fascinates me, Morrison," Razak called out, his voice echoing through the station's comm system. Apparently, he'd figured out how to hack our internal communications. Show off. Most prey species either fight futilely or hide pathetically. But humans run, and keep running. Even when it's clearly hopeless. "Yeah, well," I panted, making sure I sounded appropriately terrified, "we're not the brightest species in the galaxy." His laughter followed me through the tunnels. "Indeed. Your survival instincts are admirable, but your tactical thinking is charmingly primitive. You're heading toward the industrial sector. Do you truly believe heavy machinery will protect you?" Actually, yes, but I wasn't about to tell him that. I dropped down from the maintenance shaft into Corridor 7, making sure to land awkwardly and curse loudly. To Razak, it probably looked like desperation. In reality, I was exactly where I wanted to be, 3 levels above the main mining equipment, with a clear path to the power distribution center. "Come now, Morrison." Razak's voice drifted from somewhere behind me, getting closer. "You're only postponing the inevitable. I've hunted creatures far more dangerous than humans, the Altarian battle-bearers of Proxima, the crystallized hunters of the vegan cluster. Your species barely registers as sport." I stumbled around a corner, deliberately leaving a clear blood trail from where I'd accidentally scraped my hand on a jagged panel. Standard misdirection. Make the hunter think you're wounded and desperate. "That's nice," I called back, injecting just the right amount of defeated exhaustion into my voice. "I'm sure your trophy room is very impressive. Do you have a little plaque that says, 'Human Dad, died scared'?" "Oh, I think I'll do something much more creative than a simple plaque," Razak replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Perhaps I'll preserve your final expression of terror. Show it to your offspring before I—" "Yeah, okay, you can stop right there," I interrupted, letting a bit of real anger slip through. "We get it. You're the big bad alien hunter. Very scary. Much intimidation." The footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was silence, and I wondered if I'd pushed too hard, broken character too early. Then Razak laughed again, delighted. "Excellent. A bit of spirit before the end. Your file mentioned you are a problem solver, Morrison. I do hope you'll try to problem solve your way out of this. It's so much more entertaining when the prey thinks it has a chance." Perfect. Let him think I was just a desperate dad making jokes to keep from breaking down completely. Meanwhile, I was already at the power distribution center, quickly rerouting electrical flow to the mining sector. To anyone watching the station's power grid, it would look like random fluctuations, maybe a panicked engineer trying to restore emergency lighting. In reality, I was charging up the industrial excavation laser. "You know what's funny?" I said, continuing my stumbling flight toward the mining bay. "My wife always said I was too stubborn to die, even at the end she kept saying I was too pig-headed to let anything keep me down." "How touching," Razak said, his footsteps resuming their patient pursuit. "And where is your beloved wife now, Morrison?" "Dead," I said simply. "Transport accident 3 years ago. So if you're planning to threaten her or use her against me, you're about 3 years too late." Another pause, then, I see. So your protective instincts are focused entirely on your offspring. How wonderfully concentrated. How exploitable. The mining bay was just ahead, through one more maintenance corridor. I could hear the excavation equipment powering up, responding to my remote commands. 40,000 tons of machinery designed to crack open asteroids, all charging up and waiting for someone stupid enough to corner a desperate engineer in the wrong room. Here's the thing about humans, Razak, I said, dropping through the final access hatch into the mining bay. We might not be the strongest, or the fastest, or the smartest species in the galaxy. His footsteps were right behind me now, confident and unhurried. But we're definitely the most vindictive. And when you threaten our kids... I activated the emergency lighting, flooding the mining bay with harsh industrial illumination. Well, let's just say you picked the wrong species to hunt for sport. I could hear him entering the bay behind me, could practically feel his anticipation. In his mind, he'd just cornered his prey in a dead-end room. Game over. Time to show him what a cornered human engineer could really do. Razak entered the mining bay like he owned the place, which I suppose from his perspective he did. 8 feet of chitinous nightmare, moving with the fluid grace of something that had never met a predator higher up the food chain. How appropriate, he said, surveying the massive excavation equipment around us. The prey seeks shelter among the tools of its trade. Tell me, Morrison, do you truly believe your primitive mining devices will avail you against Kytherian hunting technology? To emphasize his point, he activated some kind of wrist-mount scanner. Immediately, the device began painting targeting lasers across my chest. Apparently, he'd upgraded from basic stalking to high-tech murder. Thermal imaging engaged, he announced, like he was narrating a nature documentary. Pheromone analysis active. Cardiac rhythm monitoring online. I can track your fear, Morrison. I can smell your desperation. Great. So he had the alien equivalent of a tricorder crossed with a hunting rifle. This was going to be trickier than I'd thought. I scrambled behind a massive ore processor, making sure to breathe heavily and stumble convincingly. Look, we can work something out, right? I've got salvage rights to some pretty valuable asteroids, rare earth elements, crystallized carbon matrices. Attempting negotiation, Razak noted with clinical interest. Classic survival behavior. Your species genuinely believes commerce can solve any problem. His scanner beeped, and suddenly a blast of superheated plasma carved through the ore processor like it was made of paper. I dove sideways, genuinely startled. That thing packed serious firepower. Interesting, he continued, moving closer. Your heart rate spiked to 140 beats per minute, adrenaline levels increasing, but no corresponding spike in stress pheromones. Curious. Crap. He was noticing that I wasn't as terrified as I should be. Time to sell the performance harder. Please, I gasped, letting my voice crack. My kids? They're just babies. Emma's only 8. Tommy still sleeps with a stuffed animal. They need their dad. Ah, there it is, Razak purred. The desperation of a parent. Your pheromone output just tripled. Much better. What he didn't realize was that the desperation was real, just not for the reasons he thought. I was desperate to keep him distracted long enough to get him positioned exactly where I needed him. I made a break for the main excavation platform, running in a pattern that looked panicked but actually followed the maintenance walkways I'd memorized years ago. Behind me, Razak's weapon discharged again, carving molten furrows in the deck plating. Your evasion patterns are improving, he called out, almost sounding proud. Most species simply run in straight lines when frightened. Humans seem to retain some tactical thinking, even under extreme stress. Yeah, well, I panted, ducking behind a massive drill assembly. We're full of surprises. That's when he really started showing off. The wrist scanner was apparently just the opening act. Now he deployed what looked like a full sensory suite. Micro-drones buzzed out from his armor, creating a 3-dimensional tracking net. His weapon upgraded itself, reconfiguring from a simple plasma rifle to something that looked like it could take out a small spacecraft. Deploying advanced hunting protocols, he announced. Drone surveillance network active, predictive targeting online, multi-spectrum analysis engaged. The drones started mapping the entire mining bay, creating a real-time tactical display that probably showed my exact location, probable escape routes, and suggested kill zones. This guy wasn't just a hunter, he was a walking military installation. But here's the thing about advanced technology. It makes you overconfident, and overconfidence makes you stupid. You know what I love about you apex predator types? I said, triggering a controlled hydraulic failure that sent a shower of sparks across his drone network. You always assume your prey is too primitive to understand your fancy gadgets. 3 of his drones went down in the electrical cascade. Razak paused, apparently surprised that a primitive human could interfere with his equipment. Clever, he admitted, but ultimately futile. I've hunted species with technology far superior to your own. The mechano symbiotes of Rigel 7 had nanotechnology that could rebuild their bodies in real time. The quantum wraiths of Andromeda could phase through solid matter. And yet here you are, hunting mining engineers for sport, I pointed out, using his momentary distraction to activate another system. Either those other species kicked your ass, or you're not as good as you think you are. That hit a nerve. His weapon reconfigured again, this time into something that looked like it had been designed by someone who really hated the concept of matter existing in a solid state. Perhaps it's time to end this charade, Razak said, his voice losing its amused tone. You've provided adequate entertainment, Morrison, but I grow tired of chasing wounded prey through industrial debris. The remaining drones converged on my position, painting me with enough targeting lasers to illuminate a small moon. His weapon began charging with a sound like reality tearing at the seams. Final scan complete, he announced. No additional escape routes detected. No defensive capabilities remaining. Prey cornered and helpless. I stood up from behind the drill assembly, hands raised in apparent surrender. You're right, I said. I'm out of options. Just make it quick, okay? My kids don't need to hear their dad screaming. Razak stepped onto the main excavation platform, weapon trained directly on my chest. Perfect. Exactly where I needed him. Any last words, Morrison? He asked, apparently enjoying this part. I smiled, for the first time since this whole mess started. Yeah, actually. Here's a fun fact about human mining operations. His finger tightened on the trigger. We don't use drill bits to crack open asteroids, I said, hitting the activation switch I'd been standing next to this entire time. We use controlled antimatter charges. The look on Razak's face when he realized he was standing directly on top of the main excavation charge was absolutely priceless. The thing about antimatter excavation charges is that they're designed to crack open asteroids the size of small cities. The blast containment field keeps all that destructive energy focused in one direction, straight down through whatever you're trying to mine. Unless, of course, someone with engineering credentials decides to reverse the polarity. Razak's enhanced senses finally picked up what his arrogance had missed, the subtle hum of charging antimatter containment systems, the electromagnetic field fluctuations of a mining charge preparing to detonate, and the distinctive ozone smell that preceded controlled annihilation. What? He started to say, then his scanner started screaming warnings, in what I assumed was Cytherian for, "You are standing on a bomb, you magnificent idiot." Oh, did I forget to mention, I said, backing away from the excavation platform at a speed that was no longer remotely panicked. This entire mining bay is basically one giant weapon. We just usually point it at rocks instead of overgrown space cockroaches. Razak tried to leap off the platform, but he'd spent so much time positioning himself for the perfect kill shot that he'd backed himself into the exact center of the blast zone. His jump carried him maybe 3 feet before the containment field activated, trapping him in a bubble of energy that would focus approximately 10 million tons of antimatter fury directly at his current location. Impossible, he snarled, his weapon reconfiguring frantically into what looked like a shield generator. Humans lack the tactical sophistication for complex trap construction. Your species rating indicates minimal strategic planning capabilities. Yeah, well, I said, settling into a comfortable observation position behind blast-proof mining equipment. Maybe your intelligence reports need updating. See, the thing about humans is, we don't just fight predators, we turn them into extinct species. Ask the saber-toothed cats how that worked out. His shield generator was putting out enough energy to power a small city, but antimatter doesn't really care about your defensive capabilities. It's equal opportunity annihilation. You don't understand, Razak said, and for the first time his voice carried something other than arrogant amusement. I am Razak the Deathbringer. I have claimed trophies from 47 worlds. I have hunted species across 3 galaxies. That's nice, I replied, checking the charge status on my control panel. I'm Jake Morrison. I fix air recyclers and pack school lunches. Guess which one of us is having a better day? The containment field began to pulse, each pulse a little brighter than the last. Physics was taking over now, and physics doesn't negotiate. This is impossible, Razak repeated, but his scanner was telling him exactly how possible it was. You led me here deliberately, every move, every apparent mistake. You were hurting me. Took you long enough to figure it out, I said. For a legendary hunter, you're kind of slow on the uptake. Did you really think a guy who keeps 2 kids alive on a mining station would panic the first time something tried to kill him? His weapon reconfigured one final time, into something that looked like it was designed to crack planets. He fired everything he had at the containment field, and for a moment the entire mining bay lit up like a miniature star. When the light faded, the field was still there, Razak was still trapped, and the antimatter charge was still building toward detonation. And here's what your hunting manual probably didn't tell you about humans, I said, activating the station-wide comm system. If any of my crew were still alive, they deserved to hear this. We're not apex predators because we're the strongest or the fastest. We're apex predators because we're vindictive, creative, and absolutely terrible at knowing when we're supposed to give up. Your offspring, Razak said desperately. The blast will destabilize the station's structure. You'll kill your own young to destroy me. I laughed, and it wasn't a nice sound. You really didn't do your homework, did you? Emergency Protocol 7 doesn't just hide my kids. It moves them to the reinforced shelter pod with independent life support and emergency beacon. They'll be fine. The truth was, I wasn't completely sure about that. The blast would definitely damage the station, possibly catastrophically. But Emma and Tommy were in the safest place on Kepler Station, and staying here meant certain death for all of us. Besides, I added, you made one critical error in your threat assessment. What error? Razak demanded. You threatened my children, I said, and hit the final activation switch. That doesn't make me prey, you stupid bastard. That makes me the most dangerous thing in this solar system. The antimatter charge detonated with the force of a controlled supernova. The blast containment field held for exactly 2.3 seconds, which was precisely long enough to ensure that Razak the Deathbringer experienced every nanosecond of his very educational introduction to human engineering principles. When the light faded and the shockwave passed, there wasn't enough left of the legendary hunter to fill a coffee cup. The excavation platform had been vaporized down to the molecular level, taking with it about 40 tons of mining equipment, and one very surprised alien who'd learned too late that humans don't just fight back, we innovate. I stood in the smoking ruins of the mining bay, ears ringing from the blast, and activated my comm. Emma, Tommy, you guys okay in there? Dad, Emma's voice crackled through the damaged speakers. What happened? It sounded like someone set off fireworks in a thunderstorm. Something like that, sweetheart. Just your old man taking out the trash. You can come out now. The scary thing is gone. Was it really scary? Tommy asked. I looked at the crater where Razak used to be, and smiled. Not anymore, buddy. Not anymore. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the emergency shelter with my kids, trying to explain why half the mining station looked like it had been chewed up and spat out by an angry god. So let me get this straight, Emma said, using that tone that meant she was about to logic me into a corner. An alien hunter came to kill us, you pretended to be scared while actually leading it into a trap, then blew it up with mining equipment? That's a surprisingly accurate summary, yes. Tommy looked up from where he was examining Razak's abandoned weapon, which I'd grabbed before the emergency crews arrived, because I wasn't stupid. Can we keep the spaceship? It's got really cool lights. We'll see, I said, which is parent speak for absolutely not, but I don't want to argue about it right now. Dad, Emma said seriously, that was either really smart or really crazy. Why not both? The emergency beacon had brought a rescue ship within 6 hours, along with a corporate investigation team that took one look at the crater in our mining bay and decided they really didn't want to know the details. My official report listed the incident as equipment malfunction during asteroid malfunction, which was technically true from a certain perspective. Commander Valdez survived his encounter with Razak, though he spent 3 days in medical bay muttering about impossible human reflexes and requesting a transfer to a nice quiet desk job. Science Officer Krim made a full recovery and immediately began writing research papers about human adaptive combat psychology, which apparently was going to make him famous in xenobiology circles. As for me, well, corporate headquarters sent a very polite message thanking me for my exceptional problem-solving under pressure and awarding me a commendation for innovative use of available resources. They also quietly upgraded our station's defensive systems and tripled my hazard pay. The best part, though? Emma's next school report was titled, "My Dad's Job is Cooler Than Yours," and Tommy started telling everyone that his father was an alien fighting space engineer. which, while embarrassing, was technically accurate. And somewhere in the corporate files, buried under 17 levels of classification, there's a small addendum to the human species profile: recommended threat level extreme, suggested hunting status inadvisable, note, particularly dangerous when protecting offspring. Razak the Deathbringer had wanted to add humans to his trophy collection. Instead, he'd just taught the galaxy an important lesson about why you don't mess with someone's kids. Especially when that someone has access to antimatter mining charges and a really bad attitude about uninvited guests.